So getting that air circulation, that actually really helped me with my orchid flowers. But even then, it still wasn't consistent blooming because there was one more piece, and this is the one that actually changed everything for me. It was like that level up moment where I went from level 1 to level 5, maybe, by knowing this one thing. Before we dive in, a quick note from Leafy's editor here. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of orchid species, and they don't all grow the same way. Some grow in the ground, some grow on rocks. They are actually a very diverse bunch, pun intended. But the orchid you've probably bought from your big box store or supermarket or garden centre, that's likely a phalaenopsis orchid. And those grow on trees in the wild. So that's what you're going to see throughout this video, phalaenopsis orchid care, which is actually what most people have at home when they think of orchids. But a lot of the information in this video will also work for other orchids, especially tree-growing orchids like cattleyas and dendrobiums. All right, that's it from me. Time to crack the code. Okay, so confession time. I completely killed my very first orchid. Like, really slow, watched it die over months. The poor thing, I just still feel sorry for it. And for ages, I just thought orchids were just a difficult plant. You know that image in the movies that you see where there's a big greenhouse and there's a person usually with a little bit of scissors and they're snipping off the tiniest leaf or the tiniest flower on a bonsai or an orchid? That's the image I have in my head. But after looking after orchids now for a good 5 or 6 years, I've actually figured out that orchids aren't actually that difficult. They're just very, very specific. They like what they like. I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I'm very picky in a lot of cases. And once you crack the code on orchids, they'll bloom for you over and over. The real trick though, when it comes to orchids, it's not just one single thing to get right. It's about getting several things right at the same time. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through how all of the pieces of orchid care fit together so you can grow your own beautiful, happy and healthy flowering beauties. And do make sure you stick around to the end because I'll be sharing that one thing that really helped me understand orchids, how they flower, why they flower, and it finally really clicked for me with this one thing. And honestly, I hardly hear anybody ever talking about this little secret. So when it comes to orchid care, let's start with lighting first. Honestly, lighting was the very first thing that I learned about orchids, and it's also one of the biggest things you need if you want your plant to flower, to bloom. If you don't know, one of my very first plants ever was an orchid. I wasn't even a plant person at the time. My partner just said, go try a hobby or something, buy some plants. And so I bought 3 plants and stuck them all pretty much in the same spot in this one main window, and that orchid hated me. As I said, it slowly died almost to nothing. It had no roots almost, it had no leaves. It was just this one little nub, this stem that was still kicking, just alive a little bit. So I went onto YouTube and I went down an orchid rabbit hole. And I found this amazing YouTuber. If you haven't seen her, I'm sure many of you have. Her name's Miss Orchid Girl. I absolutely love her channel. She taught me a lot. And I've learned that orchids actually need really, really good light. And I moved that plant into my bathroom and it had a skylight. And to be honest, it started putting out these little roots again. And I was so excited. But I do have to say, ultimately, look, it still did die because it just wasn't getting enough light at all in that house to keep it long term, which is a bit of a shame. But the fact that it went to nothing, went to something, and then went to nothing again taught me quite a lot about lighting. And I realize now that orchids need way more light than most people think. So my orchids, I have 4 of them. 3 of them are in bloom. 1 of them is outside. But my inside orchids all live under grow lights and they are pretty much loving life right now. If I could, I would put them into an east-facing window, into some direct sun in the morning. They love a good amount of light, but morning sun is really, really soft. Flowers, on any plant really, take a lot of energy from that plant. So if you don't have enough light for that plant, it's the biggest reason why your plant is not blooming. Now, if you have a plant that's healthy, but it's not blooming and it's just got leaves all the time, maybe that light is just a bit too dim and you might want to move it to a brighter spot. Direct sun all day, you'll burn the leaves and you don't want that either. And I have done that to one poor thing where I left it out too long, but that was a while ago. Haven't done that since. So bright indirect light is the sweet spot. Next up, let's talk about pots and potting mix, or should I say not a potting mix. So I keep mine in clear plastic pots. In fact, I actually keep them in a clear plastic pot in a clear plastic pot, which is hard to say 3 times fast if you want to try it. And I do that for a reason. For me, with orchids, that's a real must. I mean, firstly, you can actually see the roots, and the roots do tell you a lot about your health of your plant. If they're a solid green root and they're chunky and they're full, then that's actually pretty healthy. If your roots are pale green and maybe a little bit silvery on the outside, then that means your plant actually needs water. And if your root is brown or shriveled and it doesn't look good at all and it's like dark brown, it's basically died off. Cut them off. They're not doing anything for you if you want to. It's kind of like having a little bit of x-ray glasses for your orchids when you use clear pots and you can see all the roots. Anyway, I digress. Just make sure that your pot has drainage holes. It's critical for orchids, honestly, because in nature, they grow on trees. So they're clinging to bark with their roots, with air flowing around the roots and, wind and pests and all sorts. They get drenched by rain, but they never end up sitting in soggy anything really. So you need to make sure you've got drainage holes that can get all the water out when you water it. But we'll talk about watering in a second. Now, even with the perfect pot, what goes inside the pot, of course, the potting mix, actually matters too. Just bear with me because this is where I get a little bit opinionated. I really don't like those pre-made orchid potting mix bags. In fact, I actually hate them. I just don't recommend them. I say stay away from them whatsoever. Usually in those bags, it's a mix of bark, but it's mixed with peat and these water holding elements. And for me, the biggest problem is it's just too dense and holds too much water for what orchids really need. What I use is actually a very, very simple mix. And it's literally just orchid bark, not orchid potting mix, orchid bark. And I use really chunky orchid bark, not the small chunks, but the big chunks. And I also use sphagnum moss. It's about 20% sphagnum moss to 80% bark, I would say. You need that air, you need that space, you need all that space between the orchid roots, because again, that's what they're used to in the wild. They don't sit in soil, they're clinging to trees, and they've got air flowing all around them. So you need a mix, a potting mix of sorts to give them that aeration. Now, I know some of you are out there saying, but I use that mix and I love it. If it works for you, it works for you. But for me, I am not risking it. Bark and sphagnum only, and it's worked for me for a long time. So now you know that that potting mix is super airy. It's very light, it's not dense at all. So you're probably thinking, how in the world am I going to water this thing if the water's just going to completely run through it? Well, when it comes to watering, first thing I want to say is don't do the ice cube thing. Please don't do the ice cube thing. It's ridiculous. Like, it's a plant mix. Orchids do not live in the Arctic. They come from a beautiful tropical climate, warm air, warm rain. Why would they want ice cubes? I just don't get why people do it. All you need to do is take your water and pour it super slow over that bark and sphagnum mix. It's super chunky, so the water will fall through very easily. It's meant to do that. So just take your time and pour the water through. If you want to, you can actually just dip the whole pot in water in one go in a sink or in a bucket or something like that. Just don't keep it in there for too long and let all the water drain out completely when you take it out. One thing to note when you water though, do not get water into the middle of the plant leaves and the stems. You can get what's called crown rot, and crown rot is very, very hard to come back from. Actually, I don't think you can come back from it. I've never been able to. So if you accidentally get water into your orchid leaves, just grab a paper towel or something and get a little corner and dip it in right in the middle and take as much water out as you can of that middle. So obviously, if you're watering, you're going to be feeding them with fertilizer for a lot of that time. And there's this one thing that a lot of people don't actually realize when they're feeding their orchids. But before we get to that, if you are the kind of person, you're listening to this and you're really loving it, you're geeking out on plant tips and tricks, and you want more of this type of content, then I've just launched my YouTube membership called Leafy Legends. I love that name. Honestly, I tried to keep the price super low, so it's only $4.99 for a whole month. For that low price, you'll get extra bonus plant content from me. You get extra tips and tricks from me to help you with your plant journey. I'll talk more the how and the why when it comes to my membership. I'll share exclusive behind the scenes stuff like content, videos and pictures. You'll actually get a say in what videos and content I might make in the future. You'll get exclusive polls and posts and help me understand you guys better. And you get some fun badges that level up or grow the longer you stick around. I mean, I had to. If you want to check out more, there's a link below in the show notes, or just press that join button to come and join the membership. Okay, back to feeding orchids. It turns out orchids are actually really heavy feeders. In the wild, these guys are getting their nutrients from the rain running down the trees, from dust and particles, from bird droppings, from insects and stuff like that. Little constant bits of nutrition they get all the time. At home, we have to try and emulate that for them to get the best of the best. For me, I use orchid-specific fertilizer, and I do recommend that, not just the regular houseplant food stuff. And the reason is the levels of phosphorus, the P in NPK, the levels of phosphorus are elevated in orchid-specific fertilizer. And that helps flowers even more. It actually strengthens and helps support flowering even more. And I feed mine pretty regularly during the growing season, probably every second watering, every couple of weeks when I water them. The key is that consistent nutrition when they're in bloom or when they're about to bloom, not occasional like big doses and then consistent nothing. And honestly, once I started feeding mine more regularly with a really good fertilizer, that's when I really started to see my plants actually start flowering. That was one of the keys that I unlocked. That was like a secret that I unlocked. Good, regular orchid fertilizer. But as I researched more, I came to realize that there are actually still two more things that I needed to understand for consistent blooming. For example, this girl right here, it's a mini orchid. The flowers are a lot smaller than the normal orchids, and it's given me 2 stems and amazing flowers, like more than I've ever had before. And I promise you, it's down to these last 2 things. So the first one of these 2 that you really do need to try and understand is air circulation. Now, I know a lot of people say orchids need good air circulation. Yep, basics, right? That's true. But when you think about where they grow, it makes a lot of sense. So they're up in the tree canopies, there's airflow up there, it's breezy, they get a lot of air. When they're living on the bark, on the stem of that tree, they're surrounded, they're sheltered by all the leaves and the branches of that tree, right? So they're sheltered within the canopy itself. It's not stagnant air, but they're also not getting the brunt of the air blasted by the wind where all of the external tree leaves are. Does that make sense? So it's airy, but it's sheltered-ish. So here's what that means when it comes to your home. The air circulation should be gentle, but there should be ambient movement in that room, normal room airflow flowing around type thing. A ceiling fan maybe on or a low fan somewhere, that's really good. It also helps prevent rot and prevents fungal issues, which really helps. But don't put it into a drafty spot. A draft is very different. So a draft is like direct forced air, especially like different temperature air. So an AC vent or a heater or something blowing cold or warm air right onto your orchid or around your orchid, that is not good. Your plant does not like that. And it might even cause something that's called bud blast or bud drop, where it starts to flower, but then all the buds drop off and it never actually flowers and you get yellowing leaves and it stresses your plant out. So you want to think about that canopy vibe, right? Gentle air movement, not forced air from vents or drafty windows. So when I'm placing these guys in my home, I've got them near a door, but not really close to that door. It's about 3 or 4 feet away to the right of that door. So I know there's air circulation around that orchid, but it's not getting the brunt of the wind because it's behind the wall kind of thing. So getting that air circulation, that canopy vibe thing, that actually really helped me with my orchid flowers. But even then, it still wasn't consistent blooming because there was one more piece, and this is the one that actually changed everything for me. It was like that level up moment where I went from level 1 to level 5 maybe by knowing this one thing. So orchids need a temperature trigger to bloom. Now I'll explain what that means. So as I said, they like what they like. They don't just bloom whenever and wherever. In nature, blooming happens after a temperature shift, like when seasons change and days go from warm days to cooler nights. So here's the specific thing that really helps them bloom. You need about 10 to 15 degrees Celsius difference between day and night temperatures. So during the day could be 25, 26, normal room temperature, 22, 23 is fine. And then at night, it drops down to maybe 12, 15 degrees. So cooler, not freezing, you're looking for a tropical vibe still, but noticeably cooler in the evening. And that daily temperature variation, that 10 to 15 degrees difference is a signal to that plant that goes, right, time to bloom, give me some flowers. And look, it's not about avoiding temperature change altogether. It's about understanding where in your home this happens more naturally. So for example, if you have yours near an east-facing window, it will get beautiful warmth during the morning and it will stay warmer during the day in bright indirect light. Then it starts to cool down at night, right? The sun in that morning will give it just that extra little boost of warmth to help that flower know it's time to bloom or know it's time to kick in. So my orchids in my house are positioned in places where I know they naturally get that difference in temperature. So for example, this corner here, it gets cool at night because it's surrounded by actually cement walls. They're really thick cement walls because they divide my place with the neighbors. But I also have a grow light there during the day, and that grow light actually warms up a little bit compared to some of the other grow lights I have. So it's adding a little bit of warmth from the grow light, and it gets a little bit more cooler from that cement around that area. So the differential swing is probably 2, 3, 4 degrees more than the rest of my house. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, it makes a lot of difference when it comes to the right trigger for my orchids to bloom. And this is the orchid that sits in that spot, and it's given me 2 stalks.
And this is the most flowers I've ever had on this orchid, actually. I'm absolutely loving it. This is a mini orchid, by the way. The flowers are meant to be small. Can't believe how many beautiful, healthy, like perfect orchid flowers this one is giving me from the right spot in my house. So honestly, once I understood this temperature thing and positioned them where they get that day-night variation, they really started to flower for me. And the consistency every season, and a couple of times each season actually, honestly, this is the final weird and wonderful piece. And they bloom almost more than I think they will now. And so these guys are loving life in the place that I've got because all of the elements together are working to give these guys the best spot they can have in my house. Now look, when it does come to blooming, if your orchid hasn't bloomed in ages, like a couple of years, don't panic. As long as your plant is healthy, like the roots are healthy, the leaves are still lush and green, even if it's just a bit of green or white root, you can bring it back, you can bring the flowers back. So use the information I've given you today, but it does take time and patience in getting all of these things working together. So give yourself at least 3 to 6 months of consistent orchid care and then watch what happens. But honestly, once you see that first new spike forming, it is so satisfying. You feel like a really, really good plant mum, and all of a sudden you go from these plants don't like me to, oh, these plants love me. It's such a nice feeling. So now you know how all of these pieces fit together, and I hope your orchids give you lots of love and joy over and over for years to come. And if you want even more of this problem-solving approach to plant care, how all of the elements fit together, I've got an amazing Peace Lily 7 Tips You Need to Know video. If you haven't seen that before, I'm going to leave that right here for you. Or if that ice cube thing annoyed you and you want to know what other plant care advice out there is just ridiculous, I've actually done a whole video about plant myths, and I'll leave that one here. That's a fun one as well. As always, have a week full of leaves, love and laughter. That's the end of this video, and I will see you in one of these next videos. See you later. Bye.